North Dakota State Extension economist Frayne Olson is our grain market analyst this week. The first look at soybean harvest across the country shows growers are 7% complete and on pace compared with the nation's 5-year average. However, farmers are 5 points behind average in corn harvest, and only one of the top 18 producing states is ahead of its 5-year average in completion. That state is Pennsylvania. And in winter wheat, 19% of the crop has now been planted, 1 point back of normal. We talked with Frayne Thursday morning about market prices for the three commodities, but we started by asking for a quick update on conditions to the north.
We finished most of our small grain harvest, so that would be the barley, malt barley primarily. Spring wheat's pretty much finished up. We're still working on some tail end of the durum crop, but the durum was typically planted a little later, so the harvest is stretched out. There's a few people that have started on some soybeans, at least in the eastern part of the state, because we have a lot of specialty crops, in particular sugar beets. There's some of the farmers that have a lot of sugar beets also try and put in some early season or short season soybeans so they can get some of that harvested before the sugar beet season begins.
Let's look at each commodity here, Frayne. Let's start in corn. It's been back and forth this week. What's your outlook for that market?
Yeah, the corn market right now is really focused on trying to get those early harvest reports in. There's still a debate on how big is this crop, what kind of average yields are we going to get. We know that there's going to be pockets of some problems. We also know there's some areas of the country that are going to have some really fantastic yields. So once the corn harvest really starts to rolling, that's really what the market's looking for right now. As I look forward in my crystal ball, I think for the next couple of weeks, corn will primarily be in a trading range. There isn't a lot of activity on the export side. We're still kind of waiting for the harvest reports.
Do you think there's a shot to get back above 4 in the near term?
Short term, probably not. I think as we get rolling on the harvest, unless there's some real big surprises on the yield end, we're going to have some harvest pressure. We know that there's already been a lot of pre-selling of the corn crop. We're going to get the harvest deliveries going through the system. Depending upon the size of yields, we may have some, again, additional harvest pressure for guys that run out of harvest space or storage space, have to sell directly off the combine. I'm getting quite a few questions from farmers saying, well, if I have to sell off the combine, what do I do next? How do I try and maintain some ownership? So I think that, to me, that's a signal that there's a pretty good crop out there, and individually there'd be some farmers running short as bin space.
If you do have space, are you going to sit and wait?
That would be my recommendation. I think, again, we have the crop that's already been pre-harvested or pre-sold, excuse me. The pipeline will be refilled. We've got some carryover stocks from last year to deal with. I do think the normal harvest basis levels will start to widen out as the grain system trying to figure out where do we find a home for all its grain. I think there's going to be incentive to try and put it in storage. And there's a carry in the market on the future side. So there's a lot of signals telling us that put it in the bin and wait to see what happens as harvest concludes.
Soybeans, meanwhile, are as low as we've seen them in quite some time. Is there any hope in sight there?
Well, I do think there is some hope, but it's not necessarily short term. I think we're going to have to wait until we basically get the harvest over with and the market starts to shift their attention and focus onto the South American crop. They can start planting soybeans now in the northern parts of Brazil. It's been a little bit slow because of some dry conditions there, but they have a very, very wide planting window, especially again in the northern regions. So the market right now is really focused on the U.S. crop, but I think once we get that into the bin, we start looking forward a little bit onto the South American crop. There's going to be a lot of focus on the weather and what the impacts of El Nino might be to, in particular, the southern growing regions and their planting progress, because there tends to be a lot of rainfall, in particular in the early season.
So the positivity could come from weather down in South America, you think?
That's the most likely at this point. Again, unless there's some surprises when we get combines rolling here in the U.S., yield reports come in a lot lower than we expect. Of course, that would change the psychology of the market quite a bit. I guess I'm not anticipating that. I do think, again, the next real hope for any kind of rally or surprise in the marketplace will be some kind of planting problems coming from South America.
Let's move into wheat then, and winter wheat planting has started, but just tell me where prices are right now for wheat.
Well, hopefully we've seen the harvest lows, the market lows for wheat. And again, we are starting to hear some reports of winter wheat seedings and some guys planting into dry dirt. Again, right now at this stage of the game, not a big issue. The wheat market is also looking, though, to the winter wheat plantings going on in Russia and Ukraine. And in particular in Russia now, that's starting to get a little more attention. They have some very dry conditions. They had enough rain during the growing season to get a decent yield, a decent crop for the 2015 production. But they, too, are starting to plant some of their winter wheat for the 2016 year. And there's a few more concerns and issues showing up in that arena as well. So the wheat market globally is also looking not only at the U.S., but also what's happening in Russia.
Quarterly grain stocks on Wednesday. Frayne, what are you looking for?
Well, I really don't anticipate any major surprises. I think the corn market's going to be the one that looks at those quarterly stocks report the closest. And the primary reason is we have a hard time tracking feed usage, feed utilization. So we look at the quarterly stocks, the year-end summaries, which will come out now in September, and we'll start making some adjustments, kind of back calculating to say, well, what is that feed usage really going to be? So the corn market's going to focus the most on that. I don't expect any major surprises, but of course, you know what, USDA sometimes throws us a curveball. So, you know, again, we'll have to wait to see what the numbers really come out at.